Welcome back. In the earlier module, we have discussed about two key questions, that is what makes a good engineer and what are the good engineering practices, what are the ethical values to be followed by engineers, and then we have discussed about the next key question, like what are the two important values for key values for engineering practice. We will continue with the discussion and we will go to the next key question which are relevant for like ethical conducts for engineers, is like how at all do you feel like the or understand religious and ethical values to be related. So, sometimes we get confused, we think like whether religious values and ethical values are different or whether they are same. So, what does religiosity has to do with ethical practices, and like is it someone has to be a follower of certain like maybe God, so that we can imbibe certain values to become ethical. So, these questions are there at the back of our mind. So, here in this key question we are going to discuss about the relationship of religious values with the ethical values and try to see if at all there is any relationship between these two things. So, what we see, like most existing religions, so all major religions of the world uphold ethical as well as religious standards. So, these ethical standards are actually applied to the moral agents, like it is more focused on their character traits, motives or actions. So, there is difference between religions in their emphasis that that they place on such matters as spiritual and moral values of individuals, or a particular kind of family structure, because the family structure helps you to develop a bond, collaborate with each other, understand each other's feelings, maybe make small sacrifices for each other. That is what you learn from a family structure. And the faith and practice of a religion, of a nation or a conglomeration of all these things. So, religion often puts their guidance to members about what they are supposed to do as individuals, and particularly what they are called to do. So, every religion has like certain values which are important, and these values are the guiding principles or virtues. So, whenever we are talking of ethical values which are based on moral qualities, virtues, what happens if we study different religions also, there are certain key values, what we talk of spiritual values, which are similar across religions. Religions are just the practices, expression of those spiritual values, and how like we see in what nature it can be practiced. But if we get to understand the essence and we get to study the values connected to it, so there is a difference between spirituality when you talk of the values that are connected, key principles that are accepted by a particular religion, and when you talk of religiosity, it is the practices. And practices may vary from religion to religion, but if we study the core of the values of the religion and if you study throughout, you will find there is lot of similarity in the key values which are mentioned for every religion, and all the values focus towards the synergy of the person with the others in the society and to the cosmos at large. So, it talks of how to maintain a balance, it talks of sustainability. So, if we are talking of ethical values for the engineers which is focused towards sustainability, there is definitely lot to be learned from the spiritual values shared by the different religions, be it whatever religion. We have already discussed it in like environmental values and spirituality related to it. So, we find like all the religions have certain core values which talks of the like synergy, which talks of sustainability, which talks of balance between my needs and wants and how I need to, what is my degree of responsibility towards others, my duty towards others. So, as an engineer, if we understand these values, it helps us for becoming more dutiful in our profession, understanding our responsibility as a person, understanding like what should be the primary focus when we are designing for certain things. It is our own self interest, or is it the synergy and the sustainability perspective which needs to be taken care of, and the spiritual values gives guidance in this regard also. Now, we will come to the key question 4 for this module, which is how can we handle ethical subjectivism. Now, whenever we are talking of ethical subjectivism, we are talking of issues like some relativism, because we have already discussed about ethical principles which may be universal in nature, which may be objective in nature, which needs to be followed everywhere, but still that we find like based on situations, case to case basis, there could be some specific needs arising to discuss about whether like this decision is correct in this regard, or a different decision could have been taken. Like, do we always decide the way that it is decided in ethical absolutism, or we take a pragmatic lens and we talk of ethical pluralism also. So, when we are talking of ethical subjectivism, we will be focusing on those issues in details again. Now, what is the meaning of ethical subjectivism? Ethical subjectivism holds that whether a certain act is right or wrong in a given situation is determined by whether the agent performing that act believes that it is right or wrong. So, this may represent ethics as a subject where it talks of not having any objective standard. It is trying to focus on like whatever the agent who is implementing the standards believes whatever is right, and whatever that the agent believes to be wrong is wrong. So, without trying to consider whether they are very well founded in theory, whether do they have backup support for past evidences, or they can be considered right. So, this leaves a place for a dilemma on our mind. So, and when we talk of subjectivism, so question may come, how do we tackle this problem, or our code of ethics a solution for this, or we can use utilitarianism, duty ethics, rights ethics and virtue ethics as a solution for these things. So, what we find over here, whenever we are talking of ethical subjectivism and we are talking of as per a given situation, then it talks of if I think it to be right, then it is right. If I think it to be wrong, then it is wrong. Then this may sound unethical, but if it is grounded on the pillars of decision making, like that we have mentioned of utilitarianism, like which talks of doing a cost benefit analysis of the benefits and the potential harms, and what are the of action 1 compared to the potential harms and benefits of the action 2, and then making a comparative judgment. Then if you are choosing something based on that, that is utilitarianism. And like we have to understand, like if I take something as I think it to be right because it is right, it is not like we should be making a covering statement like that, but we need to justify. That is very important. We need to justify, because we are rational human beings who are making a decision about certain issue, and who are like putting a comments like we are thinking this to be right. Then why we are thinking something to be right must be based on well grounded reasons. Now I may think something to be right. People will be differing in their understanding of right and wrong, but these right and wrong should be well grounded in their reasons for. Like if I ask you why you think this to be right, why you think that to be wrong, then you must be in a position, or we must be in a position to answer, I think this to be right because of these things. I think this to be wrong because of these things. Now the ethical pillars of decision making, like utilitarianism, rights, duties, justice, care, these helps us in framing our moral reasoning for telling I think this to be right because of this. Utilitarianism talks of cost benefit analysis, where it takes care of the costs and the relevant benefits with terms of that cost, and which talks of the if it is good for a majority of people. And then we have already discussed debates about it, like who defines this majority, who takes care of the minority, if it is a rule utilitarianism, if it is an act utilitarianism. So do you think the principle is correct, or do you think the action is correct and right, and it is bringing good to the majority of people? So that is based on utilitarianism perspective. Another perspective could be the right perspective. Every people have the right to enjoy certain things, and whether we are trying to compromise on their rights in order to get our projects done, we making them suffer. We are not allowing people to enjoy their rights for something. So, and now if rights of two stakeholders are coming to conflict with each other, then which right supersedes the other right? These are important thoughts to be kept in mind. When you talk of duty, it is a part of our duty towards the organization, towards the public at large. So like again, we should be we should be knowledgeable about these duties, and we should try to see that through our practices we are able to do this duty. When you're talking of fairness, then it is fairness of process, fairness of distribution, and we are talking of being fair in your actions, means giving, like looking through all the options before we take a decision, and whether we are doing justice to people, whether we're just doing justice to the environment at large. These needs to be taken care of. When you're talking of care, we're talking of environmental ethics, we're talking of people who are like not able to speak for themselves, who are not able to claim for their rights. Then it comes of how do we realize our duty for these sensitive stakeholders, and how do we care for these stakeholders is a caring perspective. Above all, the virtue of the person, the characteristics of the person, where we have discussed of the ethical values like honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, responsibility, reliability. These are the characteristics of the engineers, the virtues of the engineers, which develop such an integrity in their character, such a personality pattern in them, like they are always prone to think positively. They are prone to understand their duty for others, for the public at large, for the environment at large, think of sustainability, and all the decisions that they are taking are based on their conviction of understanding, based on the yardstick of these values and the understanding of their professional ethics, and based on that, whatever they think to be right is they take it to be right, and they believe in that, and whatever they think to be wrong is they believe it to be wrong in a particular situation, based on their virtues and their understanding of their professional ethics. So if we look at what the subjective decision of right and wrong is based on, whether it is based on reasons, well reasoned, rational, and who is the person who is talking of this right and wrong, what is the nature of this person who is talking of this right and wrong, it may not appear to be unethical if you're talking of ethical subjectivism, provided it is thought of by a person having virtues of integrity, honesty, fairness, trustworthiness, reliability, responsibility, and he or she is using a pragmatic lens of looking through all the options, taking care of the rights of the people and the environment, understanding the duties towards the others and stakeholders before arriving at a decision of right and wrong, then ethical subjectivism is not unethical, but it is an ethical way to decide in a particular situation what is right and wrong, and then move forward to give a decision about it. Now we'll come to the key question 5, like what kinds of considerations are relevant to judging an act or a course of action morally justified or unjustified. So this question focuses on what are the situations, what are the things which, if identified in a particular situation, would qualify it to be considered as morally right or morally justified or not justified. What are the triggers? Specifically, we are discussing here about the triggers. What are the triggers which, if present in a situation, in an act or a course of action, which will qualify it to be ethical or not ethical? So in the last question we discussed about the person who is making the decision and whether it is subjective decision and it is right and wrong. Here we are focusing on the triggers present in the situation which will qualify it to be unethical or an ethical situation. So ethical judgments, when you're talking of judgments, it is about right and wrong, good or bad, what ought to be done and not to be done, and it requires support of reasons, justified reasons. As we're discussing, it is like if you're thinking something to be right, why it is right. If you're thinking something to be wrong, then why it is wrong, and so on. So it requires evidence, reasons. So judgments with identifiable evidence, reasons, is what it distinguishes judgment which is ethical or aesthetic, whatever it is, from like talking on intuition, where we may not have evidence, but we will tell, like, we think like this is happening in this way. So first we'll try to differentiate between intuition and ethical judgment. So intuition is that ability to recognize what is going on in a particular situation. So but this is based on actually past experience. If we tell like this is right, and maybe intuition is not scientific, ethical justification is scientific, it is actually a circular process, and it is in years of experience, maybe experience of like judging different situations, forming ethical justification, evidence, and then developing a like virtuous traits and utilizing the pillars of decision making throughout in different kinds of situations, develops an insight in the person about the situation and what is going to happen next, and what are the possible connections between the unconnected dots that we may not see, what could be the possible consequences of a particular situation and action, and what will be right in this scenario. So that years of experience or experience of handling different kinds of situations with an ethical justification develops intuition in a person. So when someone is using intuition, it doesn't mean like the person is not thinking. Maybe the thinking is happening at the back end, back processing is happening, and which is very instantaneous happening, because the cell connectivity about these thought processes have already developed in the person, which has developed an expertise in that person to think intuitively, and that is what the expertise speaks. Like the professional knowledge, experience of facing different situations, taking judgments about different situations which may have an ethical like connotation, that develops the intuition in the person, that we call of wisdom also, which develops, and that gives you an like storehouse of knowledge which you can immediately refer to and draw like this is going to happen. So if somebody is thinking intuitively, doesn't mean like the always like the person is not referring back to any rational yardstick of deciding, but definitely the person is doing it, which is a processing happening at the back, but it is happening so fast that we may not be able to recognize it, because it has already become a storehouse, which, and you don't have to revisit it like new situations again and again. A template has been formed which you can refer to and immediately tell this is look alike, this part is common, this part is different, so this is what may happen and these are the consequences of it. So that develops the intuition. So ethical justification is again based on reasons, which evidence, argument to demonstrate that something is ethically acceptable or desirable. So, and it is a necessary ethical value judgment. So ethical evaluation is a judgment about the extent to which and the object is like right and wrong as per a particular situation. So what we find, like there are different criteria for understanding the ethical evaluation of an act or a course of action. A reasoned judgment of about whether or the extent to which some act or course of action is morally justified will mention some or all of the following, like it produces good or bad consequences, it respects or violates rights, whether it fulfills or it shirks obligations, and whether it honors or ignores agreements and promises. So, these are some of the pointers, triggers which may help you to understand whether it is moving towards an ethical or unethical domain. So, the act displays or fosters development of positive character traits or negative ones. So, now when you have all these pointers, triggers, so it is now the decision maker's choice to understand how the event or situation, what turns the situations are taking, and whether it is becoming an ethical or unethical situation, and like how to deal with it. So, next what we deal with is justifications, and sometimes people give justifications for their actions and their excuses. So, how do we go for it? How do we define for it? So, like we have a small check over here, like suppose you are helping to install some equipment. You are to install one component for yourself. Afterward, you are criticized for the way that you installed it. Which of the following are excuses and which are justifications and something else? So, I was given the assignment late in the day and told to finish by 5. There wasn't time to do it in other way. That is what the building safety code required. This was my first time, so I made a few mistakes. If you don't like it, do it yourself next time. So, which of these are you find are excuses and justification, and what is the part of it? So, what we find is that when the act is of the sort that is always wrong, the act is wrong or bad. When the act of the sort that is prima facie wrong, yes, was there justification in these circumstances? No. The act was wrong. Was the agent in full control? Yes, the agent is fully to blame. Is the act prima facie wrong? No, the act is okay. Yes, was there any justification in these circumstances? Yes, the act is okay. Then when you come to this, no, the agent is at least partially excused for doing the act. When we come to the act is of the sort that is not even prima facie wrong, then yes, the act is okay if there is no other reason to think it is wrong. So, if justifying acts contrasted with excusing the agents who performed them. Now, if we go for this, like suppose you are helping to install some equipment, you are to install one component by yourself. Later on, you are criticized for the way you installed it. So, for this, what we can say, that of the, is it like always wrong? Then if maybe not, like in that case, like you are helping to install and you have been given a part to install. So one of the primary responsibilities of the engineers is competent in their work. So you have been given the responsibility to install because you are competent to do it and you have been helping people to install. That's why you have been given a part of that responsibility. So is the act prima facie wrong? So if it is no, then the act is okay. Then you find no, the act of giving the person to install was okay. So if we find like the act is wrong, maybe you should not have been given the full responsibility. If you try to justify it in that way, you should not be, you are only a maybe a junior engineer and you should not be given the full responsibility to install something. So was there any justification in these circumstances? Then you tell no, the act was wrong. Was the agent in full control? So we need to, like this situation given, we need to understand who was under the full control, like it is given like the act was given to me at 5 p.m. so I did not have resources for it. So was I full control for the consequences? Were other people responsible also? So in that case, if it is no, then the agent is partially responsible. If yes, then the agent is fully responsible. So what we try to see, like when we are justifying this type of things, so like you're talking, this is a building or safety code required me to do. So again, did I verify it, go beyond it to see like whether I have followed all the codes or not. So this was my first time, so I made few mistakes. So there is no place for mistakes in case of like in engineering practices. You cannot be casual with your responsibilities. So if you don't like it, you do it next time. These are again excuses. So if this thing, so like I was given the assignment late and told to finish it, there was no time to do it, and that is what the building code required. So these are justifications and we have to see whether these justifications given, what is the part of responsibility, what is the degree of control that the person telling was having. Was the person fully responsible, somewhat responsible? What are the situational, was the situation responsible to a certain extent? And then we try to figure out like whether the agent is fully to blame for it or at least can be partially excused for doing the act. We need to have a chain of thought process before we take care of, like when you are talking of like justifying the acts with excusing the agents who performed it. So these are some of the like key questions that we have discussed over here with respect to ethical conducts of engineers, coming to what makes a good engineer, what is a good engineering practice, what are the ethical values to be followed, then what are the two best practices. Then we have discussed about like ethical subjectivism. We have discussed about the key triggers present in the situation, and we have also discussed about if somebody gives certain excuse or justification for certain acts, then to what extent by following like branching and process of thought, and trying to map with the degree of responsibility of the person and the extent to which the person was in control of the situation or not, how can we hold the person, to what extent we can hold the person responsible for the maybe errors done, and to what extent we can excuse the engineer for it based on like maybe other circumstances present or things present in the situation or the act per se. We will come up with more key questions in the next module. Thank you.